Hello there! Recently I got to visit Gröna Lund in Stockholm, Sweden, and there I rode a roller coaster named Vilda Musen, which means the wild mouse. What I'm trying to tell you is today I'm gonna be reviewing a wild mouse roller coaster. Vilda Musen is a Gerstlauer Bobsled, and the Bobsled is known to be one of the best kinds of wild mouse coasters out there, if not the best. The bobsleds can do a bunch of things, including helixes, but also the classic things like hills and switchbacks, and Vilda Musen is a perfect example of why this model is just great. The ride is this beautiful yellow coaster that goes along with the beautiful cyan jet line right in the big bunch of metal in the middle of the park. It actually used to be like a bluish, purplish color thing, but it was repainted 3 years ago in 2018. I rode upwards of 17 different rides when I visited this park, and this was the biggest surprise of them all. The ride is built in 2003, and at the time it was the third coaster in the park. First of all though, the theme of this coaster is a classic wild mouse theme, and that, well, it doesn't have much of a theme. In the queue line there are photos and everything of other wild mouse coasters throughout history in the world, and of course the cars have a mouse on them. It's a wild mouse coaster. The ride stands at a total of 68.9 feet tall and 1,410.8 feet long, so it is not a very big ride at all. It also only goes 34.2 miles an hour, but of course a wild mouse is not necessarily supposed to be fast. It's supposed to pack a punch in another way. And of course, because it has these small 4-rider cars, it also has a bunch of mid-course brake runs to allow for greater capacity. And I gotta say, this probably had the best capacity of any coaster in the park because they constantly spat out trains. As soon as you sit down in the car, it takes like 5, maybe 10 seconds and you're underway. I also want to note that when I say 4 mid-course brake runs, I really mean 3, kinda, because one of them is more of a mid-course boost run, but we'll get into that later. It has a 52-second duration, which is pretty high up there amongst the other coasters in the park, and it definitely does not feel like a short ride at all. I would say for a wild mouse coaster, you get a lot of bang for your buck. When it comes to the layout itself, which is probably what you're here for, well, let me explain why this might actually be a thrill coaster, kind of. You start out with a classic chain lift hill, and then you go into the small twisted drop. Now in the back row, you're gonna get a little bit of weak, and I really do mean weak, floater airtime here, but it's barely noticeable. But I mean, it's there. Then you take a fun turn to the left, and then a pretty nuts turn to the right. On the POV, this turn just looks like, oh, it's banked, you know, so it probably won't do anything special. It does. It doesn't matter that it's banked, it's still severely underbanked. You get pushed to the left side quite a lot here, so you get a lot of lateral forces. You can actually see in my own POV how much I get pushed to the left. I have no one next to me in this POV, and I completely lean over the left seat because I was not expecting this, so I did not brace myself at all. It's a great start to the ride. You swoop up into the first mid-course, and there's not really anything special up there until you hit this first switchback of the ride. Now, generally, the switchbacks of Vilda Musen are really strong. This first switchback does not have the strongest laterals on the ride, but the first switchback is still better than on any other wild mouse coaster I've tried. And the following switchback, or well, whatever this is, I don't know. I mean, this isn't a full switchback, it's more of a quick change in direction, but I'm gonna call it a short switchback, because it feels like it, apart from the fact that it stops turning really fast, so as soon as you get smashed to one side, you're gonna get immediately smashed to the other again. The ride has several of these small turns, and they are all brutal. After the second mid-course, you have another amazing switchback, then you have a little twisted drop, which is nothing more than just fun. You then take a turn to the left, and then here is a banked switchback. So this switchback does not give any laterals, but because it's so tight, you actually manage to get positive forces. And I'd say that in regards to positive forces, this is the strongest moment of the ride. It's a very short moment and the forces aren't too strong, but you do get pushed decently into your seat and go like, whoa, okay, you know, that was pretty cool. Then you hit the third mid-course, and this is what I meant when I was talking about a mid-course boost run. While I barely even noticed it myself there, I can definitely see on the POV and also hear from the guys I was with that this mid-course actually boosts you forward. It has 2 little drive tires, and when you hit those, you get a slight speed boost, and that basically means that this forthcoming switchback is fucking insane. This switchback has probably the strongest laterals I've ever felt on a coaster. It's really fast, and while I wouldn't call it brutal because it's sustained and it doesn't throw you around, you definitely get smashed hard to the right. After that, you have another super strong switchback, or rather this half short switchback, which again is very brutal because of how short it is. Then you have just a fun drop. You have a floater airtime hill, which just like the first drop is only weak floater, but I mean, it's fun. It's better than on Thor's hammer, that's for sure. Then you swoop up here and get another one of these brutal little switchbacks. And then you go into the largest switchback on the ride, which is this huge one. Now this switchback is not quite as strong as the others, but it is super sustained, which means it's still fantastic. It's a great turn. After that, another quick change to direction, which is the last one of these brutal little turns. And I just kind of keep noting how fucking brutal these are, because you really do get smashed up in these little turns, and it's fucking awesome. Then you do this fun little drop into this final helix. The final helix does have very weak positives. They're not really noteworthy. I barely noticed them, but they are there. And then you gracefully turn into the final brake run. That is the ride of Vilda Musen. What an amazing family coaster. Technically, I mean, this is classified as a family coaster, and I think a lot of people probably choose this as the go-to family coaster for their kids after they've only ridden kiddie coasters. Don't do that. Choose Kvasten. That's a much more family-friendly ride. Often when I hear people talk about Vilda Musen, I hear them say, oh, that's pretty good for a wild mouse. And honestly, to me, that's just not doing it justice. Again, I don't like the terms overrated and underrated, but this coaster is super underrated. It's just brutal, and I do classify it as a thrill coaster because I think the laterals are just freaking nuts. Don't go into this expecting it to be the strongest laterals you've ever felt, because I do not have the most experience. I haven't been on RMCs and stuff, but still, I mean, the laterals on this coaster are really, really good, and they're easily the highlight of this ride. And when it comes to the smoothness, it also surprised me there. The only other bobsled I've done is Thor's hammer, which is only 1 year older than Vilda Musen, and that ride has quite a noticeable rattle that sometimes gives me a headache. However, Vilda Musen does not. While Vilda Musen does have some vibrations and maybe a slight rattle every now and then, it's incredibly smooth for its age and its kind. Now, I am a massive Gerstlauer fan, but I do know that Gerstlauer are not the best with smoothness, so the fact that this is still running so smooth after 18 years is incredible. It's smoother than a bunch of newer Gerstlauers, and honestly, it's smoother than the family suspended coaster at the park Kvasten. And that's a new gen Vekoma. So what are my overall thoughts on Vilda Musen? My overall thoughts are this. Give it a go, because it's great. It's a fantastic family coaster. It's surprisingly strong, surprisingly smooth, it looks good, and honestly, there's only one thing probably I would actually change on this, and it's simply more positives on the final helix. I was missing a good helix like on Thor's hammer in this, but that's literally my only nitpick. Maybe though also this drop here could have a more interesting approach, but again, it's nitpicks. This ride is great. While I have been sitting here completely praising this coaster, I advise you also not to set your expectations too high, because that's what was so great about this ride was the first time we rode it, and we did not expect it to be as intense as it was. Please, if you haven't yet, go watch my POV of it with sound on, because you can really hear how surprised we were. That's been my review on Vilda Musen, one of the most surprising family coasters I've ever ridden. If you've ridden this, guys, let me know what you think of it in the comments below, or if you just want to ride it or haven't never been here, let me know what you think of the coaster beforehand. Please do not skip out on this. It's great. Subscribe or something. I don't know. Bye.